Hello to my online learners and welcome to the continuing saga that is the nervous system. So we've already talked about the general tissues, about the neuroglia and the neuron. We talked about how the neuron propagates the action potential, how the chemicals are used to get the stimulus of one neuron through the synaptic cleft to another neuron. We have then talked about introduction to the spinal cord, introduction to the brain. We also looked at the cerebrospinal fluid and the meninges that protect the brain. Now we're going to look at the peripheral nervous system. So peripheral nervous system are the nerves that are basically not in the brain and the spinal cord. So when we look at it, we are going to, if I can close this, yep. Look at the different categories of spinal nerves, which are basically motor and sensory. Then we're going to look at where they attach. Briefly look at dermatomes, just mainly to know what they were. You don't have to label it. Look again at somatic and visceral reflexes. Then take on the cranial nerves, which is quite a bit of learning, but we'll summarize that probably in a table. And then compare the autonomic versus somatic again, and then the sympathetic, which is fight, flight, or free, with the parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. So still a lot going on with the nervous system. So let's go to the textbook and look at the spinal. No, let's go to the PowerPoint. So in the PowerPoint, we talked about the spinal cord. And the spinal cord is part of the central nervous system because it is the processor. But we're going to look again at the two types of nerves that stimulate with it. So we have the sensory. Remember that the sensory is coming in to the spinal cord and it's coming from a sensory receptor. So pain receptors, touch receptors, eyes, ears, nose. And then as it comes in, there is this ganglion here, and the ganglion is where the cell body is. And then it goes to the dorsal root as opposed to the ventral root. Okay, the dorsal root, then it goes into the gray matter, and usually there's an interneuron which will connect it to the one going out, which is the motor root or the motor neuron. And the motor neuron takes the information away from the spinal cord or away from the central nervous system. Okay, and the motor neuron usually has the it continues on, and then very long dendrites, and then the short dendrites and a large axon, and the cell body is more lined up with the neuron, so it's not in the ganglion. Okay, when we talked about the central nervous system, we also talked about its protection of the cerebrospinal fluid around it and the bony projection around it, and the three membranes called meninges around it. So let's look again when we look at the dorsal sensory and ventral motor. Okay. Good. Now, you don't need to know these numbers. There's usually one more than there is spinal vertebrae. So what I want you to realize, though, is some of them come out and then they form what's called a plexus. So the cervical will form a plexus. The brachial, there's a bunch coming together, and then they kind of fuse and they form this plexus. And the plexus is a mixed nerve. So it's not, or it's mixed tract, because you've got sensory nerves and you have motor nerves together, and they're bundled together. So if you look in this situation here, this could be some sensory nerves, and then you could have some motor nerves right in there, okay, together. Good, and the plexes are just complicated or branched neurons or tracts. You've got a cervical one, brachial, which means in the arm, a lumbar plexus, and then a sacral plexus, which comes out. And then the sciatic nerve is the big one that goes all the way to the foot. And there's quite often, if you have tight muscles in your hips, the sciatic nerve goes through a pair of muscles, so that's why it could be tight there. Okay. dermatomes. Derma means skin, tomes means body. So the thing about the dermatome is that each nerve that comes, each spinal nerve will innervate a certain section of the body. And it's striped all the way down. I just want you to realize that spinal nerves have a certain location where they act, as opposed to memorizing all of them. So when you look at it, most of them are in order, but you don't need to know all of them. This is only, it's really important if you, I don't know if you've heard of shingles. Shingles is a virus that lives in the nerve. So when it attacks the body, it'll attack it along a nerve. So one of the signs of shingles is stripes of rash, and the stripes of rash would go to what nerve is being attacked. We already talked about the somatic reflexes, so let's go back to the textbook to review our reflexes. Okay, let's look at the difference between somatic reflexes and visceral reflexes. And if we look at the difference between them, it is based on the somatic sensory nervous system versus the visceral sensory nervous system. So the somatic sensory is quick involuntary that come from where the somatic senses are. So that is the skeletal muscle. So skeletal muscle, joints, and bones. They are stimulated by a somatic motor neuron. So what happens is the somatic reflex is set up to prevent the body from any sort of harm. And this is done such as when you touch a hot stove, your hand withdraws quickly. This is basically you have a receptor, a somatic receptor on the skin, muscle, or joint, and then it will send via the sensory nerve towards the spinal cord, being processed at the level of the spinal cord, and then the motor nerve will bring it back and give the impulse to the muscle, which is usually to contract. When we're looking at visceral reflexes have to do with the viscera. So this will usually involve secretion from glands, contraction of a smooth muscle, such as the dilation of the pupil. They're governed by autonomic reflexes, which we'll look at. Okay, let's look at autonomic reflexes while we're here. This jumps a little ahead in the textbook, but it gives you an idea of the difference between a visceral and a somatic reflex. So a visceral reflex is a result of from a visceral sensory receptor. So this will usually show that you've got a receptor such as a baroreceptor in your carotid arteries. So this way, if your baroreceptor is being stretched, again, it's coming from the viscera, it will send a message to change blood pressure. Again, you have, the only difference really is that you have a visceral receptor. The visceral receptor will send a message to the spinal cord, and in this situation, it goes to the sensory receptor in the medulla of the spinal cord, at the top of the spinal cord. And then again, it's processed and it sends out an efferent message. So you still have a receptor, efferent sensory message, efferent motor message, and then you have well, I guess the motor nerve is not necessarily the efferent nerve is not necessarily a motor nerve. It's just an efferent nerve that takes it away. And then that will cause a stimulation of the drop in the blood pressure. So since somatic ones have to do with bones, joints, and skin, and visceral have to do with the guts. Okay, we talked about the peripheral nervous system being the spinal nerve and other nerves that are in the body, and the other set of nerves are the cranial nerves. Now the cranial nerves come off the brain and brain stem, and they're very confusing. So I'm going to show you a way to help remember them. Now, they are in Roman numerals. And just so you know, to go through your Roman numerals, if you don't know Roman numerals, they're quite tricky. Well, they're not tricky, but you start with I, and I is 1. And then you go I is 2. I is 3. Now, V is 5. So if you have 1 before V, that's 4. So V is 5, and then 1 more makes 6. V is 5, and 2 more make 7. V is 5, and 3 more make 8. So that's a V. Then when we get to 10, 10 is X. So 9 is 1 before X, or 9. Then X is 10. X plus 1 is 11, and X plus 2 is 12. Okay? So when you look at Roman numerals, I is 1, V is 5. Anything in front of a V or an X is minus 1. And then anything after, you add them together. I is 1, V is 5, X is 10. You may have seen it if you watch the Super Bowl. You'll see L is 50. Okay? And then 100 is C, I think. I'm not sure. So they're numbered in Roman numerals. Now, to help you remember them, I have a little drawing. So follow along with me, if you will. We're going to make a face. So first off, I want you to, on 1/3 of the side, draw a 7. And then across from it, draw another 7. So that is sort of your face. Now, you have 1 nose, so draw 1 where the nose is. You have 2 eyes, so draw 2s where the eyes are. Now, we're going to make 3s as eyebrows. 4s as the crowfoot under your eyes. 5 is a little different. Let me change color so 5 will show up better. When you make a 5, it goes over the top, down the side, and around, which will actually become your mouth. So over, down, and around is a 5. Now 6, let's go back and make 6 the teardrops in your eyes. And we already used 7 because that's the side of the face. 8 is the ears. Then what I want you to do is draw a tongue coming out of the mouth. Nine is the back of the tongue. So 9 is the back of the tongue. Then put 10 where your heart is. So I draw a heart and then I put a 10 in it. That's ugly, but you get the idea. Number 11 is your shoulders. And then put number 12 on the tip of your tongue. Good. So 1 nose, 2 eyes, 3 eyebrows, 4 crow's feet at the side of your eyes, 5 is your over the top, your forehead, the side of your face, and your mouth. 6 is teardrops, 7 is the side of your face, 8 are your ears, 9 is at the back of your tongue, 10 is in your heart, and 11 is your shoulders, and 12 is your tip of your tongue. Okay, now I'm going to play a little video that talks about the cranial nerves, and you'll see how they go together. Then we'll come back and we'll name them.
Cranial nerves arise from the brain and brain stem through natural openings in the cranium. These nerves supply the head, neck, and trunk. Some bring information to the brain, such as signals from our organs of smell, vision, and taste. Pair 1, the olfactory nerve. The olfactory nerve controls the sense of smell. Pair 2, the optic nerve. The optic nerve controls vision. Pair 3, the ocular motor nerve. The ocular motor nerve stimulates eyelid movement and pupillary constriction. Pair 4, the trochlear nerve. This nerve directs downward lateral eye movements. Pair 5, the trigeminal nerve. The trigeminal nerve manages chewing, the sensation of touch, and facial pain. Pair 6, the abducens nerve.
Okay. Now that before we go on, let's go through the other 6. There is what's called an, what's it called? It's not here. Oh, it's in the video. There is an acronym. So the acronym, let me introduce I gotta go the other way to edit it. One moment. Okay, let's look at the 12 cranial nerves by first off looking at the Roman numerals. So 1 is I, 2 is I, 3 is I, 4 is IV, 5 is V, 6 is V, I, 7 is V, I. Okay, let's go what we've got from there. That's awfully big. Let me make it smaller if I can. Okay. Good. So 1, now there is, let me finish my numbers. Then we got V, I, oops, enter, V, I, 7, 8, V, I, 9 is I before X, 10 is X, 11 is XI, and 12 is XII. Got it, no problem. Okay, let's look at it now. There is an acronym to help you remember, and it's at the end of the video that I'll finish showing later. But it's on old Olympus, towering top, a fin. It used to be accessory. I find very good vegan a hawk. Okay, I'll show you how that means. Oh, let me show you now. Let's save that, and then when we go, so as I was showing you here, nope, here, we were talking about these cranial nerves. there is words to help. So there's letters. No, that's not the word I want. There are.
Abducens nerve directs lateral eye movements. Pair 7, the facial nerve. This nerve manages facial expressions, taste, and salivary and tear duct secretions. Pair 8, the vestibulocochlear nerve, commonly known as the acoustic nerve. The vestibulocochlear nerve controls hearing and balance. Pair 9, the glossopharyngeal nerve. This nerve interprets taste and controls some swallowing movements. Pair 10, the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve stimulates digestive organs and slows heart rate. Pair 11, the spinal accessory nerve. The accessory nerve controls swallowing and muscles used in head movements. Pair 12, the hypoglossal nerve. The hypoglossal nerve directs tongue movements. Use one of the following mnemonics to remember the order of the cranial nerves. Each word in the mnemonic starts with the same letter of each pair of cranial nerves. On old Olympus's towering tops, a Finn and German viewed some hops. Oh, once one takes the anatomy final, a good vacation seems heavenly. On occasion our trusty truck acts funny. A great vehicle, says Howard.
Okay, that acronym is what this how to help you remember. It's a saying to help you remember things in order. If it does. It doesn't.
Cranial nerves arise from the brain and brain.
They've changed some of the terms, so they've called it the spinal accessory as opposed to just the accessory. Okay, let's go back to what I drew here. So when I was drawing here, one was the nose. So that is olfactory. Okay? 2 is your eyes, and it starts with O, so it's optic, and optic is used in sight. Olfactory is used in smell. Now, number 3 is, it's not really the eyebrows, but it's around the eye. So number 3 is to help your eyes move, so it's the ocular motor. And that is for eye movements. Now, as we go through it, there was actually 3 that had eye movements. So number 4 is also eye movement. And number 6 is also eye movement. Just different muscles. You don't need to know which muscle. Now, number 4 is trochlear, which is one of the ones that make no sense. Okay? Other than it's eye movement. And number 6 is abducens. Again, that one makes no sense to me either. But you need to somehow relate them all together. Okay. Number 5. We put number 5 around the face, and it's got 3 parts, the over, the down, and the around. So I can remember that that is the trigeminal nerve. And we went around the forehead and the side and around the mouth. So that has to do with taste. Not taste, sorry, mouth movements. Mouth movements. Chewing is the word I want. Okay. And this is a mixed one. So it's both motor and sensory. This is the nerve they're trying to dull when you get your, you go to the dentist and get a tooth done. Okay. 7, we made our face. So that is the facial nerve, and it controls facial expression. 8 is on the ears, but the ear is used for equilibrium from the vestibule. And then acoustic. Acoustic. Good thing this is multiple choice. Vestibular, acoustic. Yeah, that's not I'll have to double check the spelling of that one later because, yeah, it's wrong. Vestibular cochleal. Vestibule, because it comes from the vestibule used for equilibrium. Cochlear, because, sorry, it used to be called the acoustic way back when I first learned this in university, and they've since changed it to the vestibular cochlear. Cochlear, that's still not spelled right. Cochlear. And the cochlea is the part in the ear that helps with hearing. Number 9. Where did we put our number 9? Number 9 is at the back of the tongue. The tongue is called a glosso. And the back of the throat is called the pharyngeal. And this is used in swallowing. Oh, cochlear, that is equilibrium and hearing. Okay, good. Number 10, we put it on the heart, and this is the vagus. And we travel to vagus. So it's the one that travels a lot, and it travels to vagus. And this is used in the guts, abdominal organs, Okay. Spell check is not working tonight. There we go. Now, number 12 is on the shoulders, and you put your purse on the shoulders, and your shoulder is your purse is an accessory. Now, this textbook calls it your spinal accessory. This is the first time I've ever heard it called a spinal accessory. I just knew it as the accessory. And then H is on the tip of your tongue. So the tip is kind of below the tongue. So this is the hypoglossal. And that has to do with, hypoglossal has to do with taste. No, tongue movement. And accessory is shoulders, because you carry your accessories on your shoulders. Okay, that's a very crude way to remember things. There is a beautiful diagram in the textbook if this just confuses you all. And yeah, do the best you can. Again, it's learn it and cram it, and it's not easy, but that's the way it goes. Okay. So that is the cranial nerves, and these are specialized nerves that come off the spinal cord. If that was confusing, go back and look at this video again here in the cranial nerves, or in your textbook. There is a lovely summary table, because you know I like in the textbook. This explains them all. Don't worry about sensory or mixed. That isn't needed. And yeah, in this textbook, it's just called the accessory. Why do they call it the spinal accessory? Sorry, it's not this textbook that has the summary. Too many textbooks in my world. Too many spinal cords. Okay. Anyway, this will break it down for you. Just get a word. This, of course, is a matching question. So good luck with the matching question. This is what I mean by a mnemonic to help you learn. Good. And that are the spinal nerves. Now, autonomic nervous system is the next topic, correct? Let me just double check here. Autonomic versus somatic nervous system. We already talked about that. The autonomic nervous system is, so the somatic nervous system is the one that controls the muscles. So the somatic nervous system is voluntary. The autonomic nervous system is involuntary or automatic, hence the word autonomic nervous system. Wow, that's hard to say today. When we look at the autonomic nervous system, remember that the autonomic nervous system is automatic. So the autonomic nervous system is a subdivision that regulates activities to maintain homeostasis. So the thing about autonomic nervous system is there's one part that automatically increases and there's one part that automatically decreases. And without getting too much detail, you look at it. Now, the thing with an autonomic nervous system is that it may or may not be myelinated, and it is automatic. So here you look at the autonomic nervous system. There we go. The autonomic nervous system has ganglion, preganglion neurons can be myelinated because they're faster. The other ones are often unmyelinated because they're slower. And don't worry about which neurotransmitter, they vary. So here is a good summary. In somatic skeletal system, you've got one fiber with no ganglion. It secretes usually acetylcholine, and it's always excitatory. Voluntary. Autonomic is involuntary. It can innervate glands, smooth muscles, or cardiac muscle. Remembering that smooth muscle and cardiac muscle is the non-voluntary or the involuntary muscle. Often there are two nerve fibers that synapse at a ganglion before reaching the target. And it may excite or it may inhibit, but it's all done voluntarily. Good. Now, when you look at it, the divisions are sympathetic and parasympathetic. And basically, instead of memorizing all these activities, first off, think sympathetic is fight or flight. You want to charge up your body in order to get it to fight or flight. So you're going to increase alertness, increase your heartbeat to get more blood. You want to dilate your bronchial cells, your bronchial tubes to get more oxygen. You want to dilate your blood vessels to your muscles to increase blood flow. You're going to stimulate or decrease your gut mobility, your intestinal mobility, because you don't want to put the energy towards your intestines at this time because you don't want to digest. You want to put all the energy towards the muscles. You're going to stimulate sweat, stimulate the adrena medulla to secrete epinephrine, which is sort of like adrenaline, and you want to get ready to go. Speed up, get excited. So basically, the sympathetic nervous system speeds up everything but the digestive system. The parasympathetic nervous system will calm down everything and kick in the digestive system. That's why the sympathetic nervous system is rest and digest. So you're going to calm, you're going to decrease your heart rate, you're going to constrict your bronchial tubes to decrease airflow. You're going to increase your intestinal mobility and increase secretions for digestion. You're going to stimulate thin saliva. You're not going to have anything on your sweat glands or medulla. And you're going to stimulate the bladder wall to contract, the external sphincter to relax, so this way you urinate, rest, and digest. Okay? Now, another difference between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system is where they come from. The sympathetic nervous system is seen as is the thoracolumbar. So the sympathetic nervous system mainly comes from the middle, so from the thoracic, the chest area, and the lumbar. Okay? As opposed to the parasympathetic comes from the cranial and sacral division. And the parasympathetic nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, let's look at it, has ganglion before it goes. So usually there's two neurons involved. So most go to the ganglion and then they connect and go out again. With the parasympathetic, there is no ganglion. Okay. There we go. So that was quite a bit. Don't worry about all the different receptors and all the different activities of the receptors. That's a little bit more than you need to go. So this has been a huge unit. Pay attention to the key terms. Pay attention. Go through, answer the questions. Realizing there's a lot of name that part. What does it do? So look at all those topics. Look at all those topics. Anyway, it's been a very busy chapter. A lot of information. Take the time to learn it because